As a part of corporate governance, we are going to see the configuration of the board of directors, audit committee, independent manager, the top management, the social behavior, the aspects of the companies altogether. The idea of public approach is more concentrating on efficiency rather than power. The important features of a public approach is that it sees that bureaucrats are evil, and so it is an anti-bureaucrats. We don't want bureaucrats at all. Good morning and welcome to the first session in Unit 1, Chapter 2, Session 1, 4th semester BCom, Good Governance of India, where we are going to talk about the theories of governance. Now, when we talk about the word governance itself, this is a term that has been coined in the new economy. Rather, I would call it as the postmodern, post-industrial, post-capitalistic, post-structural or traditional kind of a factor where we have transitioned from the government base to that of governance base. So what I'm going to talk about here is about the changes that the system has brought in terms of the factors of how to govern the nation, how to bring in changes, moving from an administrative perspective and trying to bring in development from both socio-economic aspects as well as from the environmental process. Now, human society has gradually shifted focus from manufacturing to the automation factor, which means we have moved from individual knowledge towards to the group one, and the importance of communication is being emphasized. Overall, if you see that this development has been a very, very crucial one for the mankind. Why? Because initially we were relying on the knowledge, the intellectual capital of a person who used to drive the process. Now, when we are talking about technology and development, we see that the process gets initiated even more technically advanced, and you would be able to see that the demand function in terms of making the manufacturing even more accessible, making it even more flexible, and delivering it to the customer have gone on the higher scale altogether, which means to say that the importance of communication, each and every stage, the consumer is aware about his product. The consumer knows exactly what is happening in the market. Now, moving further, in the new framework of economic development, especially of the organization, management organization approaches are changing towards corporate governance mechanism. What is this mechanism which we are trying to look into? It is that it allows the shareholders to ensure the company shares which they are holding manage to be in accordance to their own interests. Now, we are giving a deeper insight to the shareholders of the company to know more about the functions, to know more about their profit and loss, to know more about the operational factors altogether. Earlier, what we used to do is that if I'm a shareholder of a company, what my interest was only in terms of dividends. My interest was not to know more about the operations or the scalability of the company. But today, when I talk about corporate governance, I am interested to find out from each and every aspect of the company, trying to make myself clear about the factor that I have invested in the right place at the right time. So today, when I talk about companies like Tata Steel, Tata Motors or Infosys or Reliance, or I'm going to talk about Apollo Hospitals or going to talk about Britannia or Nestle, what is that they have taken in the steps of a corporate governance mechanism that could actually make a shareholder feel secured about his investment? So that is the key topic today. Followed by the fundamental theories of corporate governance are rooted in the agency theory, with the theory of moral hazards implication, developing the stewardship, stakeholder, all those factors which are coming in with the dependence theory, transaction cost, and then the political theory. Later to this, many theories have been added up all together. So what we are seeing here is that there's a whole lot of theories that has been added up in terms of understanding corporate governance, but nevertheless, we are not going to get deeper into it. trying to just go more and more exhaustive about it, but rather we are going to look into two important factors of the public and the private theory. But going forward, what we want to see here is that as a part of corporate governance, we are going to see the configuration of the board of directors, audit committee, independent manager, the top management, the social behavior, the aspects of the companies altogether. Plus, we are also going to talk about the variables such as the configuration in terms of how the company is being performing. Nowadays, whenever you read newspaper or whenever you go through the Instagram or any other social media which is going to talk about the changes that have been brought in management, whether it's going to be about public as well as about the private organizations, what has been very, very important for the public is that every small change that the board wants to do or they are planning to do has been brought to the limelight, which means the awareness that has been created among the general public is on a very high scale. Which means to say that the companies cannot go back tomorrow in terms of their words or actions. It is very, very clear. And at any point of time, if you are trying to shuffle back in terms of your words, in terms of your action, and that's going to cost very heavy in terms of your share market altogether. So what is happening today is that corporate governance is providing you a path. It's trying to tell you how exactly you need to deal in the market in terms of delivery, in terms of share, in terms of growth, and how to keep your shareholders intact in terms of the performance altogether. Whenever you go through Google and you find out the top 10 performing companies in terms of dividend yield or in terms of ROI, you also need to understand that these companies have also been performing extremely well, cautious enough in terms of the governance model, because all those things will tell what kind of relationship, what kind of image, what kind of personification does the company hold in terms of the public interest, in terms of the shareholders altogether. Followed by, let's go to the public choice approach altogether. This theory is very, very important as a part of your syllabus. Why? Because during the decades of 1960s and 70s, it was a time when bureaucrats ran the government and the role played by the state was highly criticized. In response to this, the government tendency was to limit the governmental activities. Scholars suggested several reforms to limit it, but nevertheless, this was not working out. What we were actually trying to bring in here is the word called as decentralization of power. We as a country loved that era, loved that feature of red tapeism. We were inbuilt in it so much that people were afraid to come out of it. People thought that there cannot be an escape route altogether. We believe that red tapeism is predominant in the Indian economic system, in the Indian administrative system altogether. What the government actually wanted is that break out the hub and spokes model and try to become a decentralized unit, trying to give more autonomy to the state, more autonomy to those individual institutions and organizations which could run even better. But then that was a very big challenge 40 years back. Now, what was the public choice approach all about? Among the suggested reform, the public choice approach was one among them, where the motive of the government was by studying it through the economic approach, the political process, institution, public policy, types of bodies that were studied from the economic perspective. So now we are going to study this entire theory from an economic perspective altogether. Now, what is that we are going to come here? This theory was coined in the year 70s and started gaining importance because as a discipline of public administration. Now, a great person named Vincent Ostrom considered this approach as one of the most important one because he understood that these ideas can be replicated. These are when the economic ideas are applied to something, it brings out efficiency and rationality. The idea of public approach is more concentrating on efficiency rather than power. It is concentrating more on the output rather than the control mechanism. So that's where the public approach is a very, very important theory. There was a time in India where we started understanding that it is not just the person who holds the system. It is more about whether the system is able to function smoothly, deliver the output, and make it sure that we are able to give the public what they exactly want. So that is why I talk about the efficiency and the rationality. What is the logic behind running a system? How do you feel that if there is a public organization, it needs to be run in a particular manner? Why don't we give that autonomy to that? That's exactly what we were trying to understand in terms of the public approach. Followed by the public approach always favored the democratic administration. It focused on one simple thing: demand of the public. Go by the public. You know, when we talk about a constitution and we say that of the people, by the people, and for the people, that's exactly what is a public approach also interested upon. It tries to make you understand that what the public exactly want, give them that. Do not try to force your idea, your methodology into it. Rather, you emphasize on the needs of the public, and they believe that by fulfilling the needs of the public, automatically you become more an efficient administrative system altogether. Then when you look into the country called Japan, the Japanese government understood that you will not be able to run a system just out of the central government powers. What you need to do is that build in a system that gives the public to participate in every single policy, every single decision that has been taken. And that's probably one of the reasons Japanese were able to understand the autonomy concept very fast, and they were able to create such a country, such a technologically superb in terms of their growth altogether, and that made them to propel faster in every walk of life. Followed by the important features of a public approach is that it sees that bureaucrats are evil, and so it is an anti-bureaucrats. We don't want bureaucrats at all. We can run the system by ourselves. We'll allow the public to be a part of it. So we don't want this. So the only reason for removing bureaucrats is that they always look for their own interests at the expense of public. So I am more interested in how much I make. I'm more interested how much money I can make out of a project. How much will be my interest, my share and gain, which I do not want to come here. Plus, I want to prove the factor that by providing services that encourage the institutional factor and the pluralism, I'm more concerned about the factor that it should be a benefit for all rather than a benefit for someone in particular. So the public approach is more of this kind, where we go in terms of creating a rational mechanism by which everybody can be benefited. And the next one, the important features that we are talking about is that it's a critic of bureaucratic administration, where we see the bureaucrats are considered to be self-seeking by nature, and where the politicians work for maximizing their own interests rather than benefiting through the local citizens or the state. The public approach always uses economic logic altogether during the problems related to public service distribution. It always supports a democratic decisions making centers, popular participation altogether. So that's very, very important for us. Why? Because people say this very clearly. They find out from this factor. Whenever you're going to talk about that economic growth, that economic progress altogether, there are some challenges, there are some factors where it is trying to go against the democracy by going for the factor that if you're giving it more to the bureaucrats, it becomes a kind of control mechanism. But the public approach is more about making it democratic, giving the public to voice out their opinion, come out with their best ideas possible. Now, the public choice theory, which we have been looking about, is that where we try to make public administration more efficient and responsible. Mark these two words. These are very, very important. Efficient and responsible. Why? Because whenever we talk about the institutional pluralism, I'm marking this word pluralism, that is for the benefit of all, which helps in improving the standards of service, and it provides the public with a choice called of a broader range altogether. It helps them to give more choice. It helps them to select from the various options given, and you will be able to choose and make a better decision for your growth. Now, the second thing here is that it also gives you the replacement with that democratic administration to increase in terms of public goods and services. Now, when you started seeing the metro coming up in the city of Bangalore, the Silicon Valley of India, you could probably see the public-private participation altogether. The BMRCL, the Bangalore Metro Rail Corporation Limited, is one of the right examples which started from the DMRCL, the Delhi Metro Rail Corporation. Why? Because what we were interested is that to bring in this public-private, because it can run efficiently, plus it can give the citizens an option to choose for a better, faster and an efficient transport system. And at the same time, it also gives a very good revenue to the state as well as to the private corporation altogether, though people might find it slightly expensive, but still it is able to satisfy the needs of the citizen where the traffic congestion is very, very high. Now, exactly like that, so we try to see that it aims for the freedom of all consumers and welfare of them. Now, whenever you see the airports in India, which got completely decentralized, and you started seeing public companies and private companies joining hands together in terms of creating international airports and maintenance services and system, what happens here is that the government's monopoly first starts coming down. So you don't have to always depend on the government and keep saying that government will come, government will protect, government will take care. No, we don't want that. Rather, we are able to enforce and bring in a better supply of goods towards the consumer by providing better quality, by ensuring that they are able to give us better service, and at the same time we are able to see that the betterment of people by, the choice is becoming more and more broader. Now, the next thing is that the public value theory that we are going to talk about. The public value describes that the value of an organization or activity contributes to the society. So what is that an organization brings to the table? What is that the organization exactly do for the betterment of the society? This term was originally coined by Harvard professor Mark H. Moore, who was a very, very important person who saw the equivalent of shareholder value in public management, and public value is supposed to be provided with managers with a notion of how entrepreneurial activity can contribute to the common good. Nowadays, when you talk about the public value, is no longer limited to the public sector. It is used by all types of organizations, including non-governmental organizations and the private sector firms. So what we see here is that what is the value that is being derived by an organization towards the people. So if I'm going to put some money on Nestle or in MRF or in Britannia, or I'm going to put some money in Tata Steel, or it's going to be in Tata Consumers, what is the organizational value that is going to be reflected towards the consumer? That is more important in the modern day. So any activity that is done by the organization has to bring in some positive contribution to the society. If it's going to create a negative image or an impact towards the society, that would be probably the last day the consumers even want to look into the company. Now, recently, when the Adani companies were completely shattered by the Hindenburg report, we were able to understand the impact from the shareholders' side moment the negative news that gets come into the market that gets impacted towards the share. So what happens here is that every movement that is done by the company has to be carefully calibrated. It has to be calculated. It has to be precedented in such a way that it has to bring in some value to the table. So that's very, very important for the organizations today. Followed by the definition that we are going to talk about in the public value, where we see that it equates managerial success of public sector with initiating, reshaping the factors altogether. Plus, we also see that in a reason system, what is the high qualified manner, the high quality delivery that comes in consistently for the user needs. Let me make the slide very simple for you. Let us even put here, for matter of fact, Tata Motors as an example. Tata Motors is one of those leading initiative companies which took the factor that we want to make our vehicles go electric, because they understood that the need for the society to recognize and bring down the pollution factors. So when Tata Motors started bringing in electric vehicles into the market, they also want to send in a message saying that they are highly concerned about the environment. Now, most of us know that when Tata Motors became, the Tata Group, which became the promoters of the IPL Cup, which is going on in the year 2023, Tata Motors took the initiative of providing each and every vehicle with a purpose, telling to the public what is the importance of going electric. So whenever you see the advertisement, you have that environmental impact coming to the minds of the consumer with the cost-saving factor. So to the extent at which your success is being accepted and agreed by the public really makes a difference in the society. Followed by the conclusion factor, where we are going to talk about for today's class, where history is emphasized the development of theories and models of corporate governance. And in fact, there is no single form of effective governance. So I would always say that there is a mix and match that needs to be achieved, that needs to be arrived upon to get the best governance model in place, followed by the transition of capitalism, where we are going to move towards that capitalism where private organizations are going to be given better participation rates altogether. Companies have become very, very stronger, while the governments have tried to give out the domination. They have given that space to the companies because of the economic implications today. When you look into Indian Railways, which was the largest employer in India, has tried to shake out, has tried to ruffle out its feathers altogether by making the model more of a public-private partnership. So when you look into the IRCTC model, it's more of a private organization rather than the government domination coming into picture. So like this, there are several organizations where we see that the participation of the private companies are increasingly going high in order to make the governance even more acceptable. With this, I come to the end of today's session. I hope and believe that all the theories and the facts that have been told through this presentation would be of a great value to you in terms of both for the examination and also in the modern walk of life. Until we move on to the next session, I would request all of you to please go through this session, understand the models, and keep yourself always enlightened. Thank you once again for joining me today on this wonderful session. You have a great day ahead.